good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Doug Brunke, founder and CEO of Global Chamber here at our Scottsdale, Arizona, USA headquarters. And we've got a really exciting program for you. Most of our members are exporters, and so we're going to go right down the middle with what you're all involved with, and that is exporting. We've got three really tremendous speakers. They all happen to be based in the United States, but they do business all over the world, and you'll see very soon that they've each got very interesting and different stories, but they align around the joy and fun and challenges of exporting. The first speaker for us today is Joseph Dutra. He is the CEO of Kimmie Candy. Joseph, you are based in Reno, Nevada, and you've got a great story. We look forward to hearing more.
It'll be my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
So let me give you a little background about Kimmie Candy. We started in California on a farm, and as a company that was offshore. I actually had a manufacturing facility in Busan, Korea originally, and I brought that onshore in 2008, and we shut down the offshore facility and started making all our candy here in Reno, Nevada. We are what we call a panning operation. So we take candies like sunflower kernels and almonds, and we coat them in chocolate, and then we put a candy shell on them. And we have started to export. Initially, we were actually exporting back into Korea. And since then, we've exported into about 8 different countries. In 2016, we won the Presidential E Award, which is for excellence in exporting. We're only the 9th company that's won that in 58 years in the state of Nevada. And then we were basically the first candy company ever to win it in the United States. So presently we export into Mexico, which is our biggest exporting market at the moment, Canada. We go into the Philippines, Vietnam, down into South America into Chile and Ecuador. And we're just starting to get some traction back into Japan and into Korea and starting a little bit into China. So some of the challenges for us is because in the world market for food products, there's a lot of different regulations. There's a lot of different regulations with regards to the ingredients that you can legally export or sell into a country. What we found is that in Europe right now, there's a lot of issues with artificial colors. They're always going to cleaner labels. So what we're having to do here is we're having to reformulate a lot of our candies that actually are allowed into the EU. We've had issues exporting into Japan because some of the chocolates we buy have what they use mineralized whey powder, and that is that when they make that, they use benzoic acid. But because the testing methods have changed over the years, some of the chocolates that are produced in the United States aren't allowed into Japan. So we found that out in a couple of exporting projects that we did to Japan, is that it wasn't listed on the ingredient label that we got from the manufacturer. But what ended up happening is that because the testing methods are so good now, that they actually found it in the testing our product when we exported to Japan. So another part that we do also that the company has is we're also a large exporter. I have an agricultural company also called West Tech Incorporated, and we are large exporters of wheat, corn, and alfalfa, all non-GMO. That is into the Middle East. So we export a lot of corn seed and alfalfa seed into Saudi Arabia. We're also starting to export into Sudan, into Egypt and Libya. And part of that challenges in that market is that we find that we need to be able to be sure that the importer, well, we're exporting, but we have to make sure that we have phytosanitary certificates, we have federal seed labs, We can make sure that some of our documents are all in Arabic because of these going into Arabic companies. We have to make sure we have Arabic labels and all the documents are in Arabic. But what we found is that some of the import permits that we get from places like Egypt, they use a lot of European documentation because they get a lot of their products from Europe. Well, we find that the documents a lot of times don't coincide with the testing that we have to do in the United States. So they'll use IST rules that have certain label requirements. And what we find is that it's much more difficult for us to sometimes export into those countries because of the documentation. And what we do is we have to go back to the customer and have them actually amend their import permits and their documents. So for us, there's been a lot of challenges in exporting, but they're all, we can have the ability to overcome them all. So we just have to be able to work with, a lot of our FDA, USDA people. They help us a lot in getting around some of the regulations. And I think what's happened for us in the food industry and our candy company, we've pretty much got it dialed in exactly what we can export, where we can export it. So, and we've worked with our local Department of Agriculture. They're coming up with certificates of free trade. Those are certificates that show that you can legally and you are presently selling food in products in the United States without any restrictions. And so at the end of the day, it's a great business to be exporting. So we're really happy to be exporting all over the world. Oh, can't hear you, Doug. Are you back?
Can you hear me now? Okay, fantastic. So that's amazing. Congratulations on that, including the 16 E award. The one question that we'll ask, because we've got a couple minutes still available for you, is chocolate from the standpoint of how are you gauging the interest country by country in terms of what products and what sweetness and what ingredients they want, and then how do you change it back at the factory?
So what we do is a lot of trade shows. There's like the Sweet and Snacks Expo in Chicago, which is one of the largest trade shows in the United States. It's very beneficial to us. We actually show a plaque that says we're exporters. So a lot of companies don't feel that they have the expertise to export, especially food products, into different countries. There's labeling requirements, and there's also being able to have a good freight forwarder, that allows you to ship easily. A lot of times you have to have a great freight forwarder that tells you the regulations of getting, products into the country. We find that, there's pallets that have to be, treated. You can't ship into some countries with untreated pallets. There's a lot of little idiosyncrasies going into different markets. But what we find is the trade shows are where we're working with WASADA or with MAP. And what they do is they have customers from around the world that you arrange to meet at these trade shows. We do the Natural Product Expo in Anaheim every year, and we get a lot of companies from Thailand, Australia, Asia that come in looking for products that they can bring back into their neck of the woods.
Very good. That's super. And we'll have some other additional questions regarding situations with tariffs and why Nevada. I'd love to hear that, but we're going to switch now to Rafi Sewell. She's on the other side of the country. She's the founder and the leader within QuiaCle. And I think you pronounced that better than I just did, and also probably give us a little bit of what that really means. Really appreciate your enthusiasm and your success. And I think you're also an award winner, so love to hear more about your experience.
Thank you, Doug. So just so you know, QuiaCle is French. It means who has the key. So the full sentence is qui a la clé. So I took the la out to make it a little geeky. So we have the key. We believe, we know we have the key to unlock potential in people that can enable them to seek to embrace new opportunities and all that. So I sincerely believe in it. Like we were talking earlier, it's all about passion. I am a believer of knowledge transfer. I am a believer of sustainability. That is why I'm here in Tanzania, and I'm learning every day. I'm learning a lot of stuff. There are a lot of opportunity in Africa, and I've done a lot of trade show in Southeast Europe and also in the Caribbean, but I really found the potential in Africa because we have to go where the problem is. Not only that, we're gonna sow seed. The other thing is, this is where the profit also is. This is a round circle, a real round circle in Africa where we come in and bring in something, a standard way of living or a standard way of studying or acquiring wealth, and then we adapt it to that specific environment. We're not only injecting good seed, but we always also gonna get a lot of profit back from it. So it's like we're doing great things while getting great things back. So it's very important. And of course, it's really challenging. So just to go back, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. I'm a systems engineer by default, coming from the George Washington University. I started doing development work starting from school. So I was hired by Lockheed Martin to do logistic work in Chad and South Sudan. So that's how I started getting interested in development work. But I never thought I could do development work on my own. I've always thought it's going to come from a U.S. government or one of those international agency. So I'm totally new to export. I just came across export last year. And I feel like I've been doing this for the past 10 years. I've learned so much, and it's because I'm fortunate enough to meet great people that really, really care about showing me how things are going. And I was able to quickly learn, of course, but there are a lot of people out there that really want to do good things, that really want to give back. So I'm here today because I was fortunate enough to meet one of those great people. So I really want to stretch on that. Connection is always the best way to start your dream. So QuiaCle has done work with MCC. I don't know if you guys heard about Millennium Challenge Corporation. We had a contract with them. It's a subcontracting work where we'll help them. We help the MCA, which is a country that gets selected by monitoring and evaluation. So before the country gets selected, there is a U.S. team that will go in country and collect a lot of data. Once they collect those data, so they have to go to different evaluation. Then they will select a specific country to fund in terms of energy or it could be a road infrastructure. It could also be an agricultural. So we were fortunate enough when these countries get the funds, we have to help them get a decent IT infrastructure to be able to run the project. So and also there's a second phase, which is SAP implementation, where they have to kind of run the report and show the US government how they're spending the money. So what happened? Once we started implementing this solution, these government folk, and by the way, we've done work in Indonesia, Malawi, Zambia, Ghana, El Salvador. And what we noticed is those end users, those government end users who ask us to help them, to train them in other stuff other than SAP or ICT stuff, even basic or admin courses. Some of them will ask my team to train them in Microsoft project. Some of them, they don't even have an email system, so we have to kind of get a Google platform from them. So just to go and build an IT system and SAP solution, we end up doing all kind of other training aside, just basic needs. That is how the idea of creating a training institute in Africa came to me. But I didn't know how I was going to do that. But fortunate enough, sometimes last year, I attended a workshop in Virginia, and we are a Maryland corporation, but I was attending a workshop in Virginia, and because I have a lot of connection over there, that is the first time I heard about the Maryland Commerce. I've never heard about them. So, how they do different trade show. That's how I learned. Because we were still considered a startup company. QuiaCle is now 5 years old. I never thought that we could export. I thought we have to really be making a huge amount of money in US before we can even consider that. So meeting these Virginia folks, they told me about how the state of Maryland is helping a lot of small business export overseas, and how you can participate in trade shows and all that. So last year, I'm telling you, now I know you guys, I've jumped a lot of steps, but by last year at this time, I had no idea what export means. But now I have a lot of trainings about exporting. I have a lot of trainings that I can teach in terms of freight forwarding. I've gotten different certification because I realize how much potential I have in providing our services in overseas. So I went from knowing my ignorance, like taking care of my ignorance is what took me out of here. I was totally ignorant about what's happening out there. Even though I'm African, I had no idea. So I wanted to really stretch on that. Always, it's very important. How we get connected to the global world is by expressing what we would like to do, and then people will tell you, oh, you can start doing it right now. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait and make some thousands or some millions of dollars before you can start it. Because guess what? Investment is not only about cash. We have capacity building. There are a lot of people who are out there that want to use their resources, their time, and their expertise to help you get to a certain level. This is how we got here. So by talking now, I finally got into engaging with Maryland's commerce. And I got some little training with them. They gave me some funding to attend my first trade show in Eastern Europe. So I was able to go to Romania, Croatia, and Bulgaria. So I did a lot of connection, a lot of workshop with some startups in ICT over there in Southeast Europe. Southeast Europe they're really doing well, especially Romania. They're doing great. So I was able to do a lot of workshop with a couple of the companies in there. So I grabbed a lot of which was happening over there, because the environment is a little close to what's happening in Africa. So I was able to learn a little bit of the technique that I can use here in terms of having short-term goal, not long-term goal. Because in developing countries, we have a long-term goal, but you have to go by short-term goals and keep going. If not, you're gonna get quickly disappointed and give up. So once I was doing that, the MDP, the Maryland State Commerce, Department of Commerce, approached me and asked me if I would like to participate in a global consulting program that they have with the University of Maryland called SPA. And I applied for it. It's a program where you get a help to a market strategy entry to any global country, like any country overseas. So I applied for it and I got accepted. But I've already had Tanzania in my heart. So once we did that, since they knew I was in Romania, so I asked them to do the comparison between Tanzania and Romania. And we end up choosing Tanzania because that's where more of the needs are. and this is how I got here. I was here last May to conduct the interviews, to meet with a lot of company in the ecosystem. We did a lot of studies. We interviewed a lot of different sector in terms of healthcare, education, IoT, ICT, and also cybersecurity. And that strengthened my vision that I've already had in doing a lot of knowledge transfer in Africa. So I came back from Tanzania the 1st June, and I started putting all the strategy together to open the institute here. So right now, I'm already halfway in establishing a training institute, not only in ICT and cybersecurity, but also in basic business training in terms of accounting, finance, and also management, customer service, mindset. And last Saturday, I have attended a workshop where I have to give a speech in terms of event management. Like every day we practice event management. So I was able to start quicken. I'm partnering with a lot of training institutes here to start like kind of interacting with them, giving them the idea of how to align our mindset with whatever we want to learn and do in the future. So I started doing that as a business development work, so that when we fully start operation, we will get known a little bit. So I'm still a baby in terms of exporting. We haven't made any profit yet, but this is a big step ahead. Without even being fully in full operation yet, we already have half our foot in the ground. I'm working with the Science Corporation here. It's the government entity here. They're partnering with me to do different workshops in terms of advocacy, of education, like getting community together and going by baby step in learning about specific things they think the community will know. So those are what I'm doing in terms of exporting right now, like building the relationship, putting myself at their level, even though I see so many gaps. I'm just at the level of the wherever I am right now. And later on, I can use a strategy for all of us to move up to the goal that we have. I think that's about what I have to say. And exporting, one thing I've noticed, like before, I used to think exporting is all about commodity or product or physical hardware. But I never thought about exporting services. I thought big corporation like IBM would be the one who would always pass through that barrier. But I never thought it was something that is possible for a small company like QuiaCle. But we've done so far, and I'm really appreciative of the program that the state of Maryland is using. And also Global Chamber has connected me with a lot of folks here, and that always want to collaborate with us. So seriously, technical capacity development, mindset development is what we are about. So I'm very hopeful.
Great, that's great, Rafi. Thank you very much. Are you in Tanzania right now, or are you in Maryland?
Yes, I'm in Tanzania right now.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were back at your Maryland base. So you said a couple things there that were really important, and certainly another one was that Maryland Commerce provides a lot of support for companies in the Maryland area. They're a member of Global Chamber as well. Thank you for your membership, and we love seeing you be successful. So thank you for those comments, and we have some questions for you in a minute after our next speaker, who is Jonathan Randall, who's here with me at our headquarters in Scottsdale. He's the export compliance manager for Axon, the name of which you may not yet know. However, you almost know for sure the word Taser. So they're involved. They definitely are making profit. I'm guessing. You probably
We're
can't
trying.
you probably can't talk too much about that.
Yeah.
But your headquarters is here in Scottsdale. Jonathan, really appreciate you sharing your story today.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Randall. I'm the Export Compliance Manager at Axon. I'm basically in charge of ensuring that Axon as a company complies with U.S. and foreign export laws and regulations and economic sanctions. And the biggest thing that, I guess from my experience prior to coming to Axon, I worked at Ernst & Young, I worked at Honeywell, and I kind of got into export right out of law school, which I don't know if that's the normal path, but that's kind of my path. I got into export, learning about, how to export goods, in a legal and a compliant way. And that's really important to growing your global footprint is I think a lot of companies get discouraged when they look at all of these regulations, all of these laws that they have to comply with from an export standpoint. And it's, especially with small businesses, they may not always have the resources to have, a Jonathan Randall working for them, helping them navigate those waters. So to that point, I think a big way that a lot of companies can help themselves is by doing their research, understanding what they're wanting to export out of the U.S., understanding are there any controls on those commodities or that, to your point, the technology that they would like to export outside of the U.S. or export outside of their home country. Because in a lot of cases, for example, in the EU, there are export laws. In Mexico, there are laws that govern what can be sent outside of Mexico. So it's not just a U.S. Thing with regards to export laws, but it's also internationally you need to consider what am I trying to send, where am I trying to send it from, and are there any laws that may govern me exporting that given thing out of the country that I would like to export it out of. Because, I think I told Doug this, but, my dad always said when I was young, it's easy to get into trouble, but it's hard to get out of trouble. And with exporting, it's easy to get something, potentially out of a country, but, there's a lot of trouble that can come with that if you don't go about it in the right way. And then on top of doing research, I think asking questions, asking, your friends questions, if you have a friend that works at a company that does logistics or that works in a legal department like I do, saying, hey, I'm thinking about sending this widget outside of this country. Do you think that this may be controlled? Do you think that there may be certain packaging to the earlier point that was made by the other panelists with regards to, do I need to put certain labels on the commodity before I try and send it outside of the given country? And just making sure that you're asking questions, you're doing your research, and you're not you're trying to do the best you can while still understanding that you have a business to run and you can't devote 100% of your time to trying to get it all, right all the time. You're going to have to use your common sense. You're going to have to experience a few bumps in the road, but ultimately after you've exported a couple of times, you'll understand the rhythm of exporting and also understand the controls, if there are any, on your products. So I think the biggest things are research, asking smart questions, and not being afraid to ask questions. I think a lot of times we're always, if we've made a mistake where we're saying, well, I don't want to ask because I got this export out, but, I may not have done it in the right way. But asking will help because in the future you won't run into those issues, and you'll be able to navigate those waters in a better way.
Very cool. Through that, you're talking about it very calmly and rationally. I presume over the years, and in your case or the company's case, some mistakes have been made. So how have those played into kind of some of the things that you talked about in terms of prioritizing activities going forward?
I think, we're continually learning. As a company, we're also expanding into new markets. We're also asking ourselves, what's the best way to do this? And sometimes, we're on a time clock also. So I can think of a few countries where, we've wanted to expand into those countries, and a few times we've had to kind of pump the brakes and say, wait, we need to take a step back before, we do run into any issues. So I think it's a process of continuing learning and trying to avoid any significant, regulatory violations or issues as a company. But I think that, and I think I was telling you, Doug, about India. India is a country where we're looking to expand, and I think we have a great opportunity there. But there's a lot of regulations, a lot of red tape in India. So it's an area where we're consistently, from the legal team standpoint, working with the business team to make sure that we're tempering expectations, on what is required in India for us to sell our products, and kind of navigating those waters together as a team, or as we say at Axon, joining forces, so that we can best execute our company's plan in that market.
Okay, so you're basically the business team. You're meaning that they're looking at the market like, wow, this is fantastic. But then there's realities about getting to the market, some of which is compliance and getting the products successfully through customs and then into the hands of people. I mean, so are you researching that compliance piece then on your own, or you look to outside resources? How does that actually play out? So
a lot of times, we try and start with the research in-house. We don't have an endless legal budget, so we want to make sure that if we do reach out to outside counsel or outside consultants, we've already done our research, and we've done our research to the point to where if we're reaching out, it's because we have to reach out. So usually I'll start the research. I'll do, create a research memo on, these are the type of licenses that we need for our Taser devices or our camera devices. And then from there, we may reach out to local outside counsel in that country and say, hey, this is what I've come up with. Am I missing anything? And fill in the gaps. But I don't think we ever reach out to our outside counsel or outside consultants to say, hey, just give us everything. I think a part of going through this process is I need to understand it just as well, if not better, after it all, as our outside counsel does. And part of that is me doing the research first and then reaching out to our outside legal counsel or consultants.
Gotcha. Okay, how many countries are you involved with now?
I mean, I would say 50, 60, a lot.
50 or 60?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And generally we're selling our goods. So we're a public safety company that sells Taser devices, and we used to be called Taser International. Taser devices, record in software solutions for record management and evidence management, and camera devices, which are a lot of body worn cameras, in-car cameras, etc. And a lot of times we're selling to law enforcement in these different regions or countries, also to governments.
Okay, and hence the reason why there's maybe more compliance with these
Exactly. So our Taser devices are controlled in many countries, if not for export, for being a firearm. A lot of countries, the Tasers is considered to be a firearm. And then our cameras in some countries, due to the level of encryption on our cameras, may also have certain regulatory requirements.
Does that also mean you need to be aware of what ITAR is telling you? Because that's going to limit you to certain countries.
So currently, our main product lines are controlled under the Export Administration Regulations, which is administered by the Department of Commerce. However, when I worked at Honeywell, a lot of our products were controlled under the ITAR, which is the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. The Export Administration Regulations is dealing with a lot of commercial goods. The ITAR dealing with a lot of military goods and having a lot more, I'd say, bite as a regulation. But currently, we don't deal with a lot of ITAR. However, in some of these countries, we do deal with their laws related to weapons, which in some countries are considered to be controlled from a military standpoint.
Okay, gotcha. Are there certain countries that are really, really difficult to sell in, other than the regulatory issues of India, like where the products are viewed as something that's kind of outside the scope of their citizens to have, for instance?
Yeah, so I think that the UK, from a camera standpoint, the EU in general is difficult because of regulations like GDPR and other privacy laws, and then also in the EU are taser devices, or we also call them conducted electrical weapons. They're considered to be firearms, so there's laws with regards to who can possess, who can transport. There has to be certain packaging, etc., with regards to our taser devices.
Great story. We've got about 20 to 25 minutes for questions, and so if you have a question, please text the text box. And it looks like we do have a couple questions, and I've got a couple. I'd like to swing back to Rafi and Joseph regarding the question around maybe things you've learned, mistakes maybe made that said, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Have there been some learnings like that for each of you?
Yeah, I think some of them have to do with financing. For us on export, what we found is that, we used to do a lot of confirmed irrevocable letters of credit doing in business in the Middle East. And what we found is that we were having a hard time getting paid on them because of a lot of the changes. The banks sometimes would receive, the product would be in port. We'd export 5 or 6 containers of a product into Saudi Arabia, and then the banks would start to work on words, and what we found is that sometimes if the customer in a country like the Middle East didn't want to get the product or didn't have the money, didn't want to take it out of his bank account for some reason, he would ask their bankers, would end up really taking a long time of negotiating the LC, and they would find somewhere that there was a word that was off. It should have said 2 and it said 1, and the documents were a little ambiguous, and so we actually stopped doing a lot of those projects on confirmed irrevocable letters of credit and just did cash against documents. After we had some history with the customer, it became a lot easier to do a cash against documents. So as soon as we sent the documents to the bank, they were able to pay for it. So I learned that at the very beginning because, cash flow on exports are one of the biggest issues because we buy, several $100,000 worth of product or grain or seed, and the transit times are usually anywhere between 30 and 45 days into the Middle East. And then you've got some prep times before, so you're really looking at 60 to 75 days before you can really get paid on a project. And so then you have to make sure you've got good relationships with your suppliers. And if you don't, then you have to look at doing confirmed irrevocable letters of credit again and doing back-to-back LCs. So what you do is once you get a confirmed irrevocable letter of credit, then you turn around and do a back-to-back LC with your supplier, and so they know that they're getting paid as soon as you get paid. So that gives them a little bit more comfort level. So I think over the years, that's the biggest issue I've had is figuring out how to get paid in a timely manner.
Gotcha. That's a big issue.
Yeah.
Rafi?
So I'll give you the example in Tanzania, and I'm pretty sure that's the way it is in Africa. Yes doesn't always mean yes. When you hear yes, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. That's one thing I'm learning. I'm learning how to decode communication. So I'm decoding. It's crazy. And you really, really, really have to be humble to make it in Africa. I'm telling you. And I remember I had a workshop when I came back in June. I spoke at the Economic Development Center in Florida. As American corporation, as American people, we really have to put ourselves at the African community level, really understand what they worship, who do they listen to. It is so important. And let me tell you something, the maid, how do I use it? That's how the little guy, the guy, the cleaner is very important person. If you are dealing with a corporation, right? The guy cleaning that office is a very important person to get to have a good relationship with, because that person will give you a better information than the person even working into the corporation officially. So it's very important. I am and you have to speak their language, not only in terms of speaking Swahili or the local language. You really have to speak their language. It's a mindset. I've been here I'm here to establish, to make our institute official here, and then to get the Tanzania accreditation. I can tell you for 3 weeks, nothing was moving because I wasn't speaking their language. But every day I get, yes, kesho. Kesho means tomorrow. Yes, kesho. Yes, tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. I received that for 3 weeks until I met one local Indian, and he kind of helped me. So, and how to kind of deal with that. So things started moving. So I'm halfway through now. The other thing, one thing I've learned, so the U.S. Embassy knows I'm here. The MD knows I'm here. Sometimes if you want to make things move, just don't go the big way. Just go very local. You have to go to the lowest. I mean, how do I call it? I don't call it low. You really have to don't look different in the society. If you look different, you are not going anywhere. I don't know how we're going to fix that. Basically now I've been here for a month and a half. Now everybody thinks I'm from Tanzania, so I'm doing better. But the first 3 weeks, everybody knew that I'm a foreigner. Now, when we start speaking the language to a certain level, that's when they realize that. But I already get everything that I need. That's when I realize I'm not local. If you don't act local, it's gonna be hard for you to get something.
Yep, that makes sense. So you said some really important things in there. I think we all have wrestled with that yes/no issue, right? And part of the reason why people go indirect to markets is to rely on somebody that hopefully that they trust to be that intermediary. So how have you each made that decision, kind of direct, indirect in each of the markets that you're addressing? Rafi, you're going direct. It sounds like you're right in the middle.
Direct. Yeah.
And so you need to get right into to visit with the cleaner. In terms of the Joseph, you and Jonathan, I'm presuming most of what you do is indirect, but how have you made the decision kind of country by country on those kinds of things?
So I think it kind of goes to what Rafi was saying about kind of knowing someone who has the connections in that country. So in a lot of cases, we'll go indirect in a country because it is a country where relationships are valued so much. So if we have a distributor in the country who has all of these great relationships, then we'll try and leverage that distributor to assist us in the sale of our products and getting people onto the Axon network. Going direct sometimes is a situation where we'll look at a market, we'll say, there's a lot of opportunity in this market. We think that, we could, we already have some connections in this market. And I think, we're mature enough in this market where we're able to kind of wean ourselves off of the distributor and go direct. However, in a lot of cases, we're using distributors and going indirect into these markets just because the distributors have these really great relationships. That being said, we generally have a country manager or a manager of that region who's working with the distributor also to ensure that things are going smoothly and our products are being represented in the best way in those countries or regions.
Have you got to the point where you're going indirect and then you actually switch them out as the business evolves at that point? Yeah.
In some cases, I think we like to say that we transition them. We are in a market and we feel like we're strong enough to do it on our own, and then we'll start working on a transition.
Okay, Joseph, indirect or direct, and have you done any transitioning?
Well, we primarily work with the candy business. We primarily work through distributors. It can be, even a couple of distributors in a country like Mexico. We have 2 distributors. We do a lot of private label. We find that when we go into places like Vietnam or the Philippines, they're actually requiring a document that says they're an exclusive distributor for us. Now, that we sometimes have several exclusive distributors in a country because they don't deal with the same classes of trade. So pretty much in the food industry, we do really pretty much indirect. In the ag industry, like where we're exporting seed into the Middle East, we're really pretty much doing that direct. We deal with some of the larger farming operations in Saudi Arabia, and they don't want to deal with anybody in between. So we kind of we do both worlds. We do indirect and direct sales. We just want to do sales. I think for us, it's whatever the easiest flow of commerce going in, and we know sometimes we have to work through distributors, and sometimes we know we have to work direct. So it's really up to your decision as a business of what works best for you.
Okay. Oh, that sounds good. How is the current situation, the trade wars and tariffs impacting each of your businesses, if at all?
Well, I think, the tariff issue for us has really not been an issue. Our biggest issue in the candy industry, of course, is sugar reform. The U.S., for whatever reason, we pay the highest price for sugar of anywhere in the world. We pay about 2 to 3 times what world price is. So what we found in the U.S., a lot of companies that their products are primarily sugar-based, like guys who are making sugar cane, candy canes, and those kind of products, they've moved to Mexico or to Canada because they can get better pricing on sugar because their products are primarily sugar. And then they import it in, and maybe it costs them another 6% to bring it into the U.S. NAFTA is kind of keeping the same program. The U.S. sugar programs for us are not really controlled by NAFTA. They're really controlled by the USDA. So for export, for us, we've not seen a lot of issues for our type of candy. Going into Canada, they've imposed a 10% tariff on, block or bar chocolate. We're not into that market, so we weren't affected by anything with regards to NAFTA or Canada or Mexico. Worldwide, we're not seeing any real issue with us because we're manufacturers. So when it gets adjusted, because we're selling something at $1 a pound or $2 a pound, by the time it gets to the consumer, it could be $10 a pound. So there's ways to adjust that 10% duty along the way because we're manufacturers. So I think as a distributor, people can just adjust their margins a little bit, and it doesn't really affect the consumer that much. What we find is more difficult for us is currency exchanges. When Mexico, when the dollar is so much stronger against the peso or against the Canadian dollar or against the Philippine peso, it creates more issues with us because it becomes more expensive for them to buy the same product that they bought last year. Maybe it costs them now 20 or 30% more this year because of a strong U.S. dollar. So we're more concerned about the the strength of the dollar in a lot of those countries than we are really about the tariffs.
Okay, very good. Jonathan, what about you guys?
I think where we're seeing the most effect from kind of the trade war is in our supply chain. So parts and components that we source outside the U.S. and trying to import them back into the U.S. We're seeing a lot of kind of these kind of retaliatory tariffs kind of hitting us there. That's probably the main areas is in the supply chain.
Okay, so relatively minimal.
Yeah, I think it's minimal. We're constantly, as a new list comes out, we're constantly having to kind of reassess and take a look at where we're sourcing and what we're sourcing. If we're sourcing anything from Taiwan or if we're sourcing anything from China, we will have to look and see, especially China, what's the benefit, is the benefit still there? Even with that, tariff being attached to it, is the benefit still there to source it from China, or should we look at another country to source it from to avoid that retaliatory tariff?
Gotcha. You don't market in China?
No, we don't.
And that's a decision by the company, or is it some regulatory issue, or both?
So with regards to China, we do have certain areas, certain components that we source from China, and we do sell our cameras in China. Currently, we do not sell our CWs in China, and that is a regulatory decision.
Okay, gotcha. Rafi, are you pretty much immune from all of this? The U.S. Africa, I presume, is not in the trade war.
Not at all, and we are into education and knowledge transfer. Anyway, training is really needed here. I have so many requests about training, so I think this is the right time for us to be here.
Okay, that sounds good. What tips do you have, each of you? You embedded some of those in your conversations, but for exporters out there, and you guys are, in terms of products, you've got a lot of a range, but what are some of the things that you would advise somebody comes to you is like, I'm thinking about exporting? What are some of the key points that you'd make to them?
Well, I would say to use your government resources as much as you can. Wherever you're exporting, the Commerce Department has a lot of rules and regulations that you can source. If you say, hey, I'm going to be shipping this product into this country, they can tell you all the regulations. And then you can also work, real closely with your freight forwarders. They'll know if there's any issues. If you have a big enough freight forwarder, they'll know the issues that you can have of shipping into a country. So I really think is use your governmental organizations for whatever product you're going to do, and let them do a lot of the groundwork. And you can also work with people in other countries. We also have government agencies that are in Saudi or in Libya or Philippines, and you can actually talk to them direct and work through their trade department to give you any kind of insight into anything that may be an issue of exporting into that country.
Gotcha. And government, I think probably we're thinking mainly of U.S. federal government. But there's, in the case of Rafi, you talked about Maryland Commerce. Most states have a very active Department of Commerce. And then a lot of cities, most cities have some sort of an international component.
And county too.
And county, exactly right.
Frederick County is doing great about that.
Frederick County, yeah, exactly right. So those are all examples of different resources, and you've got in each country. And Joseph, you guys, because you had the plant in I think you said Busan, Kotra is a great asset typically for companies that are investing in Korea and exporting to Korea. So you've got really every country has those entities, and that's one of the reasons why Global Chamber collaborates with everybody, because you may have a relationship with one government or two government entities at different levels, but we've got relationships with all of them, and the intent there is to help connect you up to those kinds of resources. You've also got people like the SBA, which probably all of you may not use anymore, but maybe Rafi, in the beginning of your business, would be an example.
Yeah. The thing is, the SDA works with the main MD Commerce. Everything is all together now. It's one team. So whether you start with the SBA or you start with the county or the state, they're all one team now. They will connect you. Like I got 2 grants. My first grant was from the MD, and the second grant is the collaboration with SBA and collaboration between SBA and MD. So there is all one team now. So it doesn't matter if you come from the county, the state, or the SBA. They all work together to give you the best help that you need. And as Joseph said earlier, you have to let them do the groundwork for you first. And this is how I'm able to come to Tanzania now, because the Maryland Commerce did a great job hiring a South African company, doing the great groundwork for me in the month of March and April, before I was able to come here in May. That was what really give me that stepping stone to come here and do the rest. And I was able to use my common sense and make some good relationship and do some direct. So you have to kind of do both. You have to kind of mix it up and try to find your way out. But it's I believe the first step is to use the state help.
Yep. And come to us for anything that you have issues with. We have an exporter here in the U.S. that had a problem in Egypt, and there was some sort of a conflict between the USDA, this was a food product, USDA, and the commercial side of the embassy. So they asked us to get in the middle of that, go around some of that, so because it doesn't always work perfectly. So all of these resources are available to make it work. And while we're talking about Maryland Commerce, on the 30th of this month, they're hosting for Global Chamber the ambassador of Georgia to the U.S., and he's talking about exporting and investment opportunities in the country of Georgia. So if you're back by then, Rafi, please join us for one. And it's actually a Globinar as well that will be broadcast around the world like this. What tips would you have, Jonathan, in terms of like, here's an exporter, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm thinking about expanding from 1 to 2 to 5 countries? What are some of the things that they should be thinking about?
Don't do anything illegal.
For sure.
I think the biggest thing is kind of, I think everybody's kind of said it, is reaching out to your local government, asking questions. If you're not comfortable reaching out to your local government and you do have the funding, it may be good to reach out to an international trade attorney or an attorney that specializes in the export of the type of goods that you'd like to export, to get kind of an overview of what you need to consider. And then a lot of times after you get that overview, you can do the legwork. You can apply yourself to obtain a license, or you can work with the freight forwarder yourself to ensure that the goods are packaged in a certain way. You don't need an attorney for that. But sometimes it's good to get that initial kind of lay of the land from an attorney or someone who specializes in the export of those type of goods. And then I think you need to do a cost-benefit analysis. I think sometimes as companies, what we're trying to do is we're trying to expand into this region or into this country, but the amount of money that you're going to invest in trying to get set up to export to that country may not even be worth what you're ultimately going to get out of exporting to that country. So I think kind of doing that cost benefit analysis up front is important before you sink $60,000 in legal fees and another you ship 100 or 1,000 widgets and then they get stuck at customs and you never see them again. It's really understanding the cost benefit analysis, understanding what needs to go right and what happens if something goes wrong, and how to mitigate that, and how to deal with that. And again, going back to what I said in the beginning, research and asking good questions before you actually export anything.
Well, we've come to the end of the hour, so if any of you have more additional content, we'll be circling back with you. Our plan is to have a blog post that has all of this together. And so, but that'll be, usually it comes out in a week or two, and I would expect that to be the case here. The last two programs we've done, we do these every week, at least one a week, and the last two, I believe, are both up on our blog at globalchamber.org. One was on Internet of Things, IoT, and the other one was about developments in agriculture, which was mind-blowing. It was really spectacular. Both of them were really good. The next one is similar to the agriculture one in the sense it's about healthcare. So what's happening around the world in healthcare, and we have speakers all around the world speaking then. That's on the 10th of October, and then later, if you miss it, likely on a blog. The 17th, we've got fraud, what's happening around the world and how are people avoiding fraud. We kind of touched a little bit on that in the illegality. Then on the 30th, we've got the ambassador of Georgia, so please, if you're interested in that, I would encourage you to attend that. And then finally, on the 7th and 8th of November, we have, if you've heard of the software ACT, it's a contact management, very famous, I think, one. That's a company called SwiftPage, and they're on the 7th presenting how to manage your members and customers and prospects through a new product that they're introducing this month. So learn about that in English on the 7th of November and in Spanish on the 8th. And then finally, actually, one more thing I wanted to mention, because we talked about government agencies, and we do work very hard to make sure that we're connected at all the levels we talked about. One of those agencies is JETRO, or the Japan External Trade Organization, that's based in Tokyo. And we have a very high-level leader within JETRO speaking with a high-level leader at Toyota, and also Claudio Toyama of the Maryland chapter, speaking about the Asia workforce, what's happening there, how is gender balance being incorporated in diversity, and what are some of the evolutions around innovation and technology in Asia. That's on December 6th in the US and in Europe, and on December 7th in Asia for most places. It's one event. It just happens to be split across two different times. So thank you, everybody. The sound you don't hear is the applause of people all over the world thanking you for your time. And stay in touch, everybody. Have a great day.